Hey guys, this is Colin Zhu, aka The Chef Doc, and thank you so much for taking the time out to listen to my podcast. On my podcast, we talk about eating and cooking and living from a whole foods, plant-based approach. And between my patients, clients, and my audience listeners, I get a lot of questions of, hey doc, how do I get started on how to set up a kitchen? Or what should I buy? What should I make? Is there something beyond a salad, broccoli, and a smoothie? I know in our fast-paced life and during a pandemic, it is much more challenging to be able to teach yourself and learning how to cook. And so I partner up with Listenable, who is a leader in audio educational courses that are bite-sized. And I went ahead and created a course on how to get started on a whole foods, plant-based lifestyle. And in this course, I put in my best tips, tools, and tricks on everything that I've learned on how to get someone started, to eating more plants, getting healthier for you and your family. I talk about how to set up your kitchen, from the pantry to the fridge to the freezer, to how to navigate the supermarket, to what kind of utensils and appliances one needs to have, to what do we need to make, how to meal prep, what kind of cooking techniques there are, and what exactly is whole foods plant-based. And I'm able to make this course over 10 lessons. Each of those lessons are less than 10 minutes long. And you'll be able to finish this in an hour. You could even do it while commuting, exercising, or even walking your dog. And in addition, you can choose from over 3,000 plus original audio lessons created by well-loved experts. Just use the coupon code COLINZHU, COLINZHU, on listenable.io, and you'll be able to get 30% off a year of Listenable. So definitely check that out in the show notes, and check out the course on how to get started on a whole foods plant-based lifestyle. And I'll see you there. Thanks for listening, and now back to Thrive Bites. Hey guys, welcome to Thrive Bites, the official podcast of Dr. Colin Zhu, aka The Chef Doc. On every episode, I talk with health and wellness experts from all over the world, such as doctors, chefs, dietitians, coaches, and many more. And I sit down with them and have casual conversations about plant-based lifestyle, how to elevate our emotional resilience, and what it really means to thrive. And I bring all of this to you. So let's get to this week's episode. Okay, guys. Well, welcome to another episode of Thrive Bites. I'm your host, Colin Zhu, and thank you for coming on. I have a wonderful, wonderful guest. This is Dr. Vania Manipod. Say hi to everyone, Vania.
Hi, everybody. So thankful to be on here with you, Colin.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time out from your busy day. And, we're just really, really, really happy that you're here. For those of you who do not know who Dr. Manipod is, she is double boarded in neurology and psychiatry and practices general psychiatry in Southern California. She has a very holistic approach to psychiatry, incorporating psychotherapeutic techniques, diet and lifestyle, in addition to managing medications. And she has and utilizes many, many schools of thought to her approach, and that makes her very, very special and unique. So I'm so glad. Thank you so much for hopping onto the call with us.
Yeah, of course. Of course, Doc.
Awesome. So I'd love to start off by asking, tell me your story. I'd love hearing our experts and guests and really talking about their stories from A to B. And it's really about the centerpiece of why we do what we do, really talking about our origins and, take us through A and B, share us with that. And what has inspired you to go into general psychiatry?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, interesting. I guess starting a little bit about myself. So I'm Filipino American. I come from a very huge family. I'm the oldest of 33 grandchildren, and that's just on my mom's side. So family is like a huge, important part of who I am and what I do, but also being the oldest, I kind of felt the need to be an example and be a leader, especially for my cousins. Being the oldest, I felt like, okay, I have to set an example and do good. So I didn't really always want to become a physician, though being Asian, that's kind of the expectation.
Hmm.
I thought that for a really long time, but what inspired me to go into medicine was when my grandfather passed away. He passed away from cancer, and he was the one who really motivated me to become a physician. But even he was also, in a sense, inspiring me to become one. But I was also the pressure. And then when he passed away, and that feeling of obligation was gone, I realized, like, I don't have the pressure to become one anymore, but I actually do want to become one. So it's kind of like, I think something that a lot of Asian Americans go through is reconciling the pressure to go into the medical field, but if you actually really truly passionately want to go into it for yourself. So, going into medicine is something I felt was my purpose, but going into psychiatry, that kind of came about. I mentioned my family, as a kind of what do you call it? Like a motivation for me to go into psychiatry, because being the oldest, I also wanted to go into a specialty where I felt like I could make the most impact and kind of lead, I guess you would say.
Hmm.
And psychiatry was one where I felt like I could be a leader. I just felt like there were a lot of things about psychiatry that I really enjoyed and I really loved, but there were a lot of things about the way psychiatry is practiced these days that I didn't like, which was, kind of, and I'm sure you can relate to this. You're pretty integrative and your focus is on lifestyle medicine, but it was a focus on medications and only, pretty much. And that's the direction of psychiatry right now, and or has been. And I didn't agree with that. And I wanted to be able to kind of inspire future psychiatrists and also maybe my colleagues to look at it more holistically, look at the whole person,
Hmm.
recognize that in order to have an impact on our patients with mental health struggles, we can't just give them medications. We have to look at them as a whole. So that's kind of why I went to psychiatry, and then also decided to, to go into social media, which maybe I'll talk about more, probably talk about
Hmm.
more, with questions later. But yeah, I decided to go into social media and make an impact there because that's how I felt I could reach a wider audience, such
Yeah.
as being on your podcast. Yeah.
No, it's awesome. I mean, you and I, we actually pseudo met maybe 2, 3 years ago. We were just talking about this before the session, in at a national conference expo, and you went first before I did, and you
Hmm.
were talking about how to present via social media, and I think I did a culinary medicine demonstration, and it was
Yeah,
just
you did.
literally in the middle of the floor, and yeah, it was good because you have a lot of audience members that gravitate towards it, and you have a lot of medical students, residents, just wanting to get fresh perspectives. And I think it
Hmm.
was that same, no, maybe it was a different year where there was also another DO, we're also DOs as well,
Hmm.
where there was a physician that was using dance as a form of therapy and be able to motivate his patients and things like that. His name escapes me right now, but
That's so cool. I
yeah,
missed that.
yeah. But yeah, awesome. I mean, as a Asian, are you a first generation Asian American?
Well, my parents came here because my dad was joined the military.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I was born in North Carolina.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but were your parents immigrated or were they born in America too?
They were born in the Philippines.
Okay, so you're first
Yeah.
generation. Yeah. So I'm similar. I mean, like, Chinese coming to America, same, very similar stories and tapestries where, you just want to give better opportunities. And in a way, they're always grooming you to seek higher education and to have that kind of position and career. And it was just funny because I just saw a recent Netflix on with Ronnie Chang. I don't know if you saw
Oh
that.
my gosh, I love him. Sorry, I just had to say
Yeah,
that. I love him.
yeah, I love him
Love
too.
him.
But it's so accurate because he says that one of the top reasons why Asian Americans parents or immigrant parents want their children to, either be a lawyer, engineer, or, even a doctor, is really just to make money and for status. And he just jokingly talks about how helping people is actually last on the list. So,
Yeah,
and
that was hilarious.
I just couldn't stop laughing. But wow, 30 plus siblings. So I can definitely put myself in your shoes, because I'm the eldest, but not,
Huh.
so many, different siblings and extended family members. And I'm sure it was very challenging for you to kind of come up through that kind of childhood.
Well, it felt like I don't know. It's because I don't know life any other way. It did feel like there was a lot more pressure on me, but like after analyzing it, part of what I talk about on social media is I'm open about being in therapy, which I think everybody should be in. It's amazing. Part of like my therapy was also processing some of that pressure that I had, and to being the oldest and feeling like I have to do perfectly and do right. And I I think it was challenging at times, but at the same time, it's shaped who I am, and I don't think I would be considered a leader in the mental health or psychiatric field unless I had that upbringing. So yeah,
Right. And it is, I don't know for you, but psychiatry is a very atypical field for um, Asian doctors to be in. I haven't come
true.
across that many Asian psychiatrists. So I think it's a very, I graduated my bachelor's in psychology,
Uh,
and I love it. So I think it's something that we all need to incorporate one shape or other. But I am curious, because you did highlight the fact that modern psychiatry, not necessarily practiced by all, but it's really emphasized more on the medication, right?
mm-hmm.
The pharmacology, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But can you kind of highlight when that shift actually happened? Because when did we go from the psychiatrists who used to, from the back in the day where we had the infamous chair, when people
Mm-hmm.
lie down and talk about it, and we psychoanalyze them, to let me just look, maybe not even look at you, hold out my prescription pad, and within
Right.
5 to 7 minutes write you something. Like, when did that shift happen?
Right. And that's interesting. I don't know exactly when it happened, but I do know, even in my residency training, my program director, what I really liked about where I trained at was my program director at the time. He's a psychoanalyst, so that is the very kind of traditional, kind of Freudian kind of train, like where people are on the couch and you analyze their thoughts and that type of thing. I mean, he's a psychiatrist, but that's how psychiatry was taught and emphasized. You were required to go through that extensive psychotherapy training in his time. um, I don't know how old he is, but so a standard. You have this extensive training in medication management, but probably equally so psychotherapy. And the shift happened. And gosh, I'm gonna I'm gonna refrain when it comes to discussing insurance companies, as I'm
Mm,
sure you know.
mhm.
But a lot of the shift has happened because insurance companies they don't make as much money from psychiatrists doing
Okay.
talk therapy. Yeah, doing talk therapy for like an hour. They make money from quick visits. The more patients you see, the more money they make. So there has been this shift. It's not really known, right, by the public, because they think, I mean, I'm just speaking in generalities, but the public generally thinks that psychiatrists they want to just make money. They think that maybe psychiatrists should want to make money, see as many patients as possible. They don't realize that the reason that we have to do that is because insurance, maybe if we see a patient for 30 minutes, in general, insurance will only reimburse us for like a 5-minute visit. So in order to get decently adequate compensation, you have to see more patients. And that's really impacted the way psychiatry is practiced,
Mhm.
because then we can't spend as much time with our patients as we should. We can't spend as much time getting to know why are they sad, or tell me about your story and your background. We don't have as much time to focus on that, even though that is something that I try and do even before. When I would have patients that I would see for just 20 minutes, I would try and do 19 minutes, talking about their life, and then 1 minute medication management, because I don't want psychiatry to be that way. It's like I'm fighting up against the system, but it really has changed as a result of insurance companies.
And I don't like talking about it, but it's something important to emphasize and highlight, especially for our general audience that are listening, is it's not, yes, I mean, I hate for money to be the central piece of everything, but that's our current infrastructure. And there are better ways of doing it. There are different models being implemented. And, currently right now, we have our psychologists, we have behavioral health therapists, we have, social workers, doing that portion of the therapy, and, for me, I'm like, the more the merrier, and I'm not as, let me keep all the patients to myself and do everything myself. To me, it's like, I always have believed in a team approach. And as long as we're communicating well with each other, then why not help the patient together? But it is sad to see that shift. And I don't know if psychiatrists, like you said before, but, in terms of, I guess just being an older sibling, it's like you don't really know the difference, right? So it's not right. Like we're in that generation where you grandfathered into the insurance, paradigm shift where, okay, you're going to be doing more medication, management, and whatnot versus, let's talk less. We didn't, and it's the same in family practice, and that's what I practice, and where you're not making money from going over someone's diet and lifestyle recommendations, and not only that, we're not giving the time. That's not the current infrastructure that we work under. So. Yeah. And are you doing a private practice, or are you part of a group practice, or how are you?
Oh yeah. Well, right now I'm an independent contractor for a private practice. So I do outpatient psychiatry. And what was I going to say? I chose that because I just felt it also gave me more flexibility, I guess, in my schedule. I experienced burnout from my first job out of residency, which is something I talk a lot about in my, in my work in the media. But currently, I found that the best practice that works for me is having flexibility in my schedule. So I see patients 3 days a week, but the rest of the time I do other things I enjoy, also related to mental health. Yeah. But I feel like having that balance ultimately makes me a better psychiatrist, because I feel kind of happier and more fulfilled, and being able to incorporate different interests into my practice as a whole.
Hey guys, we're going to be taking a short break, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hey guys, this is Dr. Colin Zhu, aka The Chef Doc. I just want to take a few moments of your time to talk to you about something that I feel needs to give reflection and pause for. Is there something interfering with your happiness or is preventing you from achieving your goals? I know for me, I've been on the self-work journey for a decade now. And I remember in my personal experiences, through my doctor's journeys and also from traveling the world, I was always searching for the next step or thinking that happiness was a destination. However, it's not. What I found instead was that life was a process. And learning about life was also a process and a practice. And that the state of happiness and the state of joy and contentment was also a practice. For those of you who don't know, since I don't share that much on my podcast, is that I actually battle with anxiety, OCD, and in the past, episodes of depression. However, little by little, step by step, after seeking extra help, I've been able to achieve monumental things in my life that I've been eternally grateful for. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. BetterHelp is a sponsor of this podcast. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It is professional counseling done securely online. There is a broad range of expertise in BetterHelp's counselor network, which may not be locally available in many areas. The service is available for clients worldwide. You can log into your account anytime and send a message to your counselor. You'll get timely and thoughtful responses, plus you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions, so you won't ever have to sit in an uncomfortable waiting room, as with traditional therapy. BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches so they can make it easy and free to change counselors if needed. It's more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial aid is available. BetterHelp wants you to start living a happier life today. A couple of reviews. This is by Rebecca Raymer. Becky has literally saved my life by truly understanding me. She has given me self-talk strategies and different thought pattern exercises that have made me stronger and a more aware person. I am so grateful to have found her. I've been to so many different therapists, and none have helped me like Becky has. This is another review for Adam Johnson. I've had counselors before, both on BetterHelp and in person through work. And Adam, by far, is the best counselor I've ever talked with. I feel like he actually listens to and what is going on. He asks questions to help you navigate your thoughts. And you can tell that he is listening and wants you to help you. Visit betterhelp.com/thechefdoc, that's better HELP, and join the over 1.4 million people taking charge of their mental state with the help of an experienced professional. Special offer for Thrive Bite listeners. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/thechefdoc. THECHEFDOC. Thank you for listening, guys, and back to the episode. Welcome back to Thrive Bites. Let's get back to the interview. Yeah. No, I would agree with you, and I do very similarly as well. For when I started my career, I went into traveling medicine or local
cool.
medicine. And like you, I was able to control my schedule and be flexible. So, and I think self-care is important. And on this podcast, we talk loads and loads about general wellness and physician wellness and burnout. And those are important topics to highlight, and I think as time goes, it's being highlighted and emphasized even more, especially during this year, during the pandemic of this year, we could see how these things are highlighted and where things aren't really being addressed and coming up to the forefront, because, we're needed more than ever, but like you said, if we don't take care of ourselves, it's kind of hard to be able to take care of others effectively and well, so.
Yeah, exactly. And just, something to be mindful of is a lot of the healthcare professionals being exposed to a lot of things that have been pretty, traumatic in treating COVID patients. As things slow down, they always talk about that's the second wave pandemic, is dealing with the mental health ramifications of it all. So, which is exactly why self-care and allowing oneself to process what happened, because, like right now, I don't think they have much time to process what's going on, the many lives that are being lost, and they feel like maybe there's no time to even think about it because they need to save lives. So it's definitely something that needs to be emphasized, especially as things start to slow down with the pandemic. I mean, we're not there yet, but eventually.
Yeah. I mean, just to put in perspective, the time of this recording is in June. Will be different from its release date, but we don't really have a handle of, what, on the first wave, let alone, just the thought of the second wave coming through is very, very, I'm very, very concerned. So let's get into the next question is, when you have thought about going more of a holistic approach, why do you think, what inspired you to be more holistic in terms of psychiatry, and why did you feel that was important for you to do?
Well, what's interesting is being a DO, such as like yourself. even though we learn this holistic approach to care, which is very important in the osteopathic philosophy, incorporating mind, body, and spirit, I didn't actually know how that would impact me later in my practice, because I kind of
Mm.
went through medical school just like, okay, it's like I knew we had to learn about the osteopathic philosophy, but I didn't really learn the osteopathic philosophy, I guess you would say, because you're so
What?
focused on. Well, I mean, I'm huge advocate of being a DO right now, but when you're in med school, you don't really have time to process like, well, how is this going to relate in my future practice? You're not really sure.
Uh-huh.
You're just trying to pass a test.
Hmm.
But it wasn't until later, as I was practicing, when my patients were telling me, you're the first psychiatrist who actually asked me about those types of things, about, like being very thorough
Hmm.
about their medical history, which, is something we learn in training. But as time has gone by, I feel like it oftentimes important components of their mental health is missed. But what we learned in training was you have to address every system, if, like, their heart condition, if what's going on, like with their health, nutrition, spirituality, all that stuff is things that we learned, but I didn't actually recognize how much it would impact me in my practice
Hmm.
until later on. So, like, even just in general, I think as a medical student going through psychiatry and all the rotations we have to do in internal medicine and surgery and all that stuff, I was always interested in various aspects of someone's life. Like, I remember in surgery rotation where,
Hmm.
it's quick. You don't really get to know a patient. I remember one of my I think my one of the my attendings, one of the surgeons, he was like, "Why are you spending so much time? Like, you need to be doing this, you need to be doing that." I'm like, but I think it's important. Like, I was like, I want to know their
Don't yell
life.
at me,
I was
okay?
like, I just want to know their life. Like, how did
I
they, how are they coping and all that?
Yeah, I know you want to cut people open. It's great, but I actually want to not.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah. So I would say our training as DOs has influenced me, but also just common sense knowing that if someone complains of depression, it's not just depression. Here's your antidepressant. It's okay. Why are they depressed? What are they going through right now? Is there foods that they're eating that's making it worse? It's like it's everything, and that's what psychiatry is. It's everything. So yeah, I could go on
Yeah.
about that.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I'm very similar. So in terms of how I relate to holistic approaches is, and I've said this many times in previous episodes, is, I've been, raised by my mother, who is a Chinese medical doctor, and she's been practicing Chinese medicine, acupuncture for like 4 decades. And having worked in and out of her practice over time, she really taught me the person behind the symptoms and the person behind the conditions. And she really taught me what compassionate care was. She taught me about
Mm,
empathy.
it's
And
amazing.
yeah, thank you. And over time, I've followed my first integrative doctor, was my first exposure to it. And then I got into like functional medicine, naturopathy, things like that. So and osteopathy was the main reason, because of its principles and philosophy really drew me in. So I actually only applied to DO schools,
Oh, cool.
osteopathic schools, because of that, because I really resonated with it. So my question to you is, during your training, did you feel like you had a lot of, they probably maybe didn't teach you different types of other holistic modalities or approaches, but did
Mm.
they kind of brush over it or talk about it, and how that later impacted you? Or did, as you started going into psychiatry and practicing, patients came to you and said, "Oh, I've been trying this, or I've
Mm.
been trying this type of alternate care. What do you think?" And then
Mm.
you thereby went into learning more and more and found that, maybe I should incorporate it into my practice.
Mm. Probably a combination of both, but I would say in my residency training, I was pretty fortunate, like I mentioned, and for any future psychiatrist, I highly recommend finding a program that emphasizes strong emphasis on psychotherapy training. But I had amazing supervisors who were psychotherapists, but also psychoanalysts. Some were therapists, some were psychiatrists, but had extensive training in psychotherapy. And I would have to say, just, when you learn about psychotherapy, you learn that you have to learn various aspects of their life, and and really get to know them. So it was kind of very, just when I went out into my own practice, it was pretty intuitive that you have to understand that there's certain things in their culture that maybe they believe in that might be helpful, or certain things like just in general in their background. So, for some people, like I had some patients tell me that, this type of treatment in their, where they're from, and in Asia, or, like the Middle East or something, is something that they've heard helped. And, what do I think about that? So it did force me to research it, because I wasn't just going to say, no, like I haven't been taught about that, or right now, medications is the only option. I had to research it, because we aren't really taught those things. We're not taught about nutrition. So I had to try and research all that on my own. And when it comes to acupuncture, there's still a lot I have to learn, but I'm very open to alternative treatments, I guess you would say. They'll tell me about it. What do I think about it? And I'll say, I need to read up on that more. But as long as there isn't any contraindications, like I'm not against it, I guess you would say. I don't know if that answers the question, but
Yeah. I mean, every physician practices differently, and to me, I think that's where the art of medicine comes through. It's where you basically come up with your own style. Like you will practice psychiatry different than your predecessors or maybe your colleagues. Of course, there's always going to be similarities, and we always have what we call the standard of care within our specialties. And but we go about it differently because innately we're already individuals. We're humans at the end of the day. And, obviously with psychiatry, we're going a little bit further because we are talking about more of the mental, emotional aspect of our human health.
Yes.
And so that's, very, very important. So, but yeah, for me, I'm a big advocate of doing your research, and I am and integratively putting that into a medical approach. But I would also say for our general public too and I think the last statistics that I read was 2/3 of patients that come to you have already sought out a alternative form of treatment before they went to their primary care. And to me, that just shows how much it's very prevalent and how much they've already done something else. And for maybe, mainstream medicine hasn't worked for them, or they're trying to find a different approach to conditions. They're, to be able to improve their overall health. So I think for our healthcare practitioners that are listening in is, it wouldn't hurt to kind of continue to learn about other modalities and see why patients are seeking other approaches for their health. So I think that's important as well.
It's an interesting statistic. I hadn't heard of that, but that should encourage us to, because then maybe it's something they tried and we don't even know what that is. So it's like we need to be versed in it.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was applied, that statistic was more applied for primary care. So I'm not sure about psychiatry, but probably presume that, they've thought about something else or they tried at something else. Right. And it's important to make sure we're all encompassing. So, but yeah, let's talk about your work in social media. And your moniker or avatar is Freud in Fashion. That is your brand. And you're pretty well known and popular. And my question to you is, why did you decide to use social media, blogging, and the different avenues that come with social media to be able to take your practice to a different level? What was the impetus from it, and what have you noticed over time from it?
Yeah. Well, I actually started blogging oh my gosh, is it 10 years? 10 years ago. It was 2010. I was in residency. I had moved away because I'm from Southern California. But I moved away for the first time. No friends, no family, which a lot of us end up doing in our training. But for me, it was really isolating. And I thought, I'm more of an extrovert side, and I need connection. And I started blogging. I don't know how. Oh, I think I found some fashion bloggers that I liked. I was like, that's really cool. Like they're able to reach people and that way. So that's kind of why my name was Freud in Fashion, because I thought, well, how do I combine psychiatry and fashion? Because I thought, ooh, like I'm into fashion. That was back then. I am not into fashion now. just making note of that. But back then I was, and I thought, okay, this is a cool way to make maybe psychiatry sound cool, because who talks about psychiatry really? And nobody was really blogging at that time. Not that many people, no physicians, I don't believe. Not that many people in the medical field. So that was actually my way of coping with feeling isolated and kind of depressed at that time. And it gave me an outlet. But then I started vlogging about the difficulties and hardships of being in residency, which is also something that you wouldn't hear about from physicians in training. So I started talking about that, and eventually evolved to me talking about, having open dialogue about it's hard going through training, and kind of humanizing just the experience we go through, because often we're held on a pedestal, right? People don't really consider the hardships as much, at least back then, of going into training. So to be a doctor. So then it eventually evolved to me talking about psychotherapy tips, because there was pretty extensive psychotherapy training at that time. Got to a point eventually, then, I started talking about my experiences and talking about becoming a burned out physician. And I would have to say that's when I started getting more attention. Like that's when the American Osteopathic Association, our medical organization, read my work. I was really ashamed actually of my first post that I did talking about burnout, but I knew it had to be said. Because you wouldn't hear so much about burned out physicians who were depressed from their profession at that time. But my blog post was widely shared, and our medical organization read it, and they actually supported my writing. And to me, that was very validating, because again, it can feel like a very isolating experience. So from then on, I started getting asked by people who read my article to do speaking engagements, which is, kind of where I met you, and one of my various speaking engagements. So I've done talks all across the country on various topics, but it started with blogging, knowing I had a message that needed to be shared about mental health and breaking the stigma. And then speaking engagements. And then I decided I would reach more people through Instagram, which, I spend the most time on sharing on there. And it just grew from there. So I've done a lot of writing for media, like magazines, and I've done media like on TV. So it's actually been pretty cool just to see it grow and how many people actually care about my message, which is really what I'm passionate about. So, and I think people can tell that I'm passionate about talking about psychiatry and mental health.
Hey guys, we're going to be taking a short break, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Thrive Bites. Let's get back to the interview. Do you have, I didn't see this anywhere, but is there a book in the works? Have you written one? Are you thinking about one?
Oh gosh. When I started blogging years ago, someone sent me a book. Someone that read my post sent me a book called How to blog a book, or something like how to write a book from a blog, something like that, how to turn your blog into a book. And I've had that book, and I keep thinking that's something I need to do. And that's what a lot of people tell me I should do. So, but I don't know. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but that would be nice.
Yeah. And so number one, going back a couple of steps, I definitely applaud you sharing, and thank you for sharing that. And I can only imagine being back in 2010, starting blogging, during a residency training for our general audience is probably a medical professional's toughest years,
Mhm.
no matter what specialty you are. And it's kind of, I think the best analogy I can associated to is, kind of like a frat, or a sorority, and almost similar to like a hazing process.
Mhm.
And traditionally, you don't really question it. You don't really, speak out about it. You don't really, before the 80-hour residency protected time of clinical work, it used to be more than 120
Mhm.
hours a week that you would work,
Right.
and that would be the norm. And this is true. Probably worse for surgeons, surgical residents, or doctors in training. And,
Mhm.
during that time to be able to write an article and to really express how you felt, and your thoughts of what you went through is huge.
Mhm.
And during that time versus now, because I think now medical organizations, I don't know about residencies, but I know from I know for work organizations that employs doctors, they are, especially in the news, you hear it all the time. They're very, very, very strict. They're very, very, very have their eye,
Yeah.
on what you talk about in the social media, because they don't want you to misrepresent, them.
Yes. It's true.
And, during the time of COVID right now, I think the biggest news that I heard was, I think it was in Washington State, where an ER doctor was fired because he was just talking about not having enough PPE or mask equipment,
Yeah.
when the pandemic hit. And he got fired from his organization for speaking out, and he posted about it on Facebook. And it was just very eye opening and very sad because he was, I think, about 3 decades of practicing as ER, and he was there for 17 years. And so that's the power of social media. And it just depends on how you use it. And I think social media for physicians is a very relatively new space.
Mhm.
And now we have, more Facebook groups and more coalitions for us coming together, but it is relatively new. So, and I'm glad that you are one of the early adopters to say like, hey, you probably didn't foresee all this coming your way, but you're just like, I just wanted to express myself. I just
Yeah.
wanted to share my experience. So
Yeah, and I think that's like a lot of people message me, mental health professionals and medical professionals, saying, "You're so open. Like, aren't you afraid your patients are going to read your stuff?" I'm like, my patients do read my stuff. I'm like, and I'm happy that they read my stuff because I'll only put out there what I'm okay with them knowing about me. But for the most part, social media could be a really amazing tool in any profession because then people feel connected with you. Um, and it kind of just bridges the gap because I think oftentimes before our patients would think, we're kind of perfect in some degree. We are held to a
right.
pedestal, but we're human and we have our struggles. And I feel like it's really helped um, them see, like, okay, like they're just like me. They go through
Yeah.
experiences like me.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And like you said, it's to humanize everything, and it's super important.
Yeah.
So on the flip side to that, from your perspective as a psychiatrist, how does social media come into play when you're dealing, when people who battle with depression, anxiety, like how does how is the flipping of social media work against us? Like you
Mhm.
have a good handle of it, and we're using social media as a tool, whether it's for personal expression, for advocacy, or maybe just ranting, right? Or whatever. But sometimes we can allow social media to be used against us. And now we're in this time of age where the latter generations are being born into cyberbullying and, hazing and, all these different things, in the context of social media. So from your perspective, like how has social media come to play with all this? Like, how does that affect patients that you see?
Yeah. And it's actually interesting because right before COVID, I did several talks on the impact of social media on mental health, saying be on social media less, like kind of restrict the amount of social media you use. And then COVID, the pandemic hits. And then we're like, oh, darn, the only way we can connect with people is through social media,
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it switched. It was all of a sudden no social media, limit social media. Then the pandemic, it's like, oh no, yeah, be on social media, connect with people, and stuff like that. So it was totally different. But we've had to view social media in a positive way with the pandemic to maintain connections. But
Correct.
so a lot of studies were done on teens to assess the impact of social media on mental health. And they found a connection to increased depression, increased anxiety, decreased self-esteem. So even more studies obviously have to be done because it's not enough, I guess, to actually indicate causation. But that's kind of why it's important to have limits no matter what. Like, so even with the pandemic, even though a lot of people turn to social media as one of their outlets to be able to connect with people, we still have to maintain boundaries. And that's kind of one of the things that they found in these studies is that moderate use is okay, right? Like it's okay, like in life, everything in life, everything in moderation, everything in moderation.
How would you say moderate for social media? Like
Yeah,
we say alcohol, one standard drink, although there have been global studies to say that, that's actually not that those studies
right.
are actually false. But how would you moderate a social media?
Yeah, and that's a tough one. So, with what I've read, it's around 3 to 4 hours a day. And at
Uh-huh.
first, I was like, wait, that's kind of a lot. But you have to understand a lot of people who grow up in this day and age. That's their way of texting people. It's through Messenger, DMs.
Hmm.
That's kind of their way. Whereas maybe, I mean, I don't know how old you are, Colin, but like I like to talk on the phone.
Yes, me too.
And yeah, and have personal, like actually interaction in person. But for them, that's their way of communicating. So it said 3 to 4 hours a day was okay, but anything more than that was excess.
Mm. Yeah, and it's interesting because it's like you can't go into a and this is talking pre-COVID, where you can't go into a grocery store where, at least for me, where you don't run into a parent or a couple where they have their kid, and in order to quell them from not crying, they'll stick an iPad in their face, right?
Yeah.
So basically, you're already grooming them or conditioning them from the start. And I'm sure you have the studies for this, but more and more are being socially isolated. And I think a large part of that is because of our dependence, quote unquote, on smartphones and screen times and social media. That takes up a large part, and we don't do, like, for me, I was born in the early 80s. I don't know when you were born, but I know what a landline is, right? I never use a rotary phone, but I know what that is. I think a lot of millennials don't know what that is either.
Yeah.
But I had to memorize my best friend's phone number, ask his mom, and be like, are they here?
Yes.
So I understand talking to a human being and, using text and Messenger and FaceTime, which is great for a pandemic, but, we're going to go past this pandemic. COVID's going to end eventually. So I guess from your perspective, what would you recommend in terms of changing that message or changing that context or changing that, how do we become less socially isolated, and
Hmm.
not depend on these devices, and be able, because I would presume a lot of it is associated with our, maybe, increases of depression and anxiety.
Yeah. So especially since I think the focus should be on the the newer generation, like the ones who like kids, where this is their only what they know pretty much for how to communicate. At least for us, being in the older generation, we kind of know, like you said, we know the difference. We know the importance of connecting with people in person, but they don't necessarily. So a
Hmm.
huge part of it comes down to us as the adults and the parents modeling this type of behavior when it comes to social media. So, if you're a parent, but and I don't want to judge anybody for how they parent, but if you're a parent and you're on your phone all the time, your kids are going to see that and they're going to think that that's okay. But if you set limits, say, okay, dinner time, family dinner, no phones at all, you're kind of teaching them like there is dedicated time where you're going to connect with family without your phone, without your smartphone. No digital interaction. It's just focusing on the here and now and being with your family. So a lot of it is really comes down to setting these limits. No phone. That's a big one also. Some kids can go with their phone at night before they sleep, but that's going to affect their sleep. So enforcing these types of limits is going to be important for them to recognize, okay, sleep is going to be important. I'm not going to have my phone because you never know what they're looking at, especially you don't, maybe kids and teens can pretty much access anything. So you have to set some kind of limits on that. So I think modeling and setting limits and also emphasizing the importance of spending time with your family or other people through in-person interactions and not digital interactions is extremely important.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, in a world, currently in a pandemic, but, there are more and more jobs where you can go remote. You don't have to be in the office.
Yeah.
So that means that you have less interaction with other human beings. And now you have more dependence if you're working at home that you're teleworking. We have Zoom capabilities now. We have, webinars and teleconferencing. And so pretty much a lot more dependence on devices. And I like what you're saying, what you said about no phones, for protected time. And that could be applicable for family dinners or even for couples, date night to not,
oh goodness, yes.
to not, yeah, exactly. To not, have phones during a conversation. And it's really, there's just so much you gain from, and you could speak about verbal and nonverbal language, but there's a lot to be gained when you're conversing with someone across the table or maybe right next to you, and to be able to use all your five senses to interact with that human being, because social the devices are just very one dimensional, very visual, very everything is the visual. So
yes, exactly.
So these are great conversations, and we can probably go on forever, but I would love to kind of close out and ask, and this is one of my favorite questions to ask, is how do you personally thrive? And what I mean by that is, what really gets you up in the morning? What lights your fire? What keeps you going? And it's really the essence of the podcast is about thriving. And, how do we take our lives, to a different level, take it higher than our day to day? So how do you personally thrive? That's the first question. And the second part to that is to be able to share 3 tips to build a better foundation, no matter where you are in terms of mental health. How do we improve our mental health from a holistic point of view? I'll give you that.
Right. So how I thrive, and this is a process for everybody, but I truly wake up in the morning, work is still work, but I wake up feeling that I have this sense of purpose and that I'm doing what I'm passionate about and what I feel like I'm meant to do. I mean, I'm a spiritual person, and I truly feel like I try and find a sense of meaning in everything that I do. And with psychiatry, I truly feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I guess I get comments from my patients saying that their life has improved because they know I care. And I get messages on social media from people who say, keep doing what you're doing. It's making a difference. And I don't really, when I do things, I don't think, oh, I'm going to make a difference. That's like my point of, that's not my point of doing it. I do it because I feel like, I do feel like it would help people. I don't know how many people it'll impact, but hearing from people that it is impactful gives me meaning, which does make me feel like I want to keep going and doing this. But in order for me to thrive, I also have to take care of myself too. And I do that. So I make sure that I exercise and try and get a decent amount of sleep. And I've started eating better so that I hate it when I get tired and then I feel like I can't do anything. So I try and maintain my energy as much as possible. So I would have to say feeling like I have this sense of purpose with what I do. It is exhausting. Don't get me wrong. There are times when I don't want to do it, but I do because I actually truly enjoy it. And I know that it's helping people. So that's that. And then, so some simple actionable steps, 3 steps. Number 1, a lot of us, and you hear it all the time. They talk about self-care. People talk about self-care. And sometimes people think of it as a negative thing. Some people view it as positive. But all of us do need self-care. So an easy thing would be to we schedule things that we need to do, right? Our appointments and everything. Schedule a self-care activity, even if it's just half an hour, even if it's just 5 minutes to sip your coffee without looking at your phone or your laptop, just some me time. And that's something that I think a lot of people struggle with. So that's why I emphasize just schedule it in, just like you would do any other priority, because your self-care is a priority. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, especially during this time with stressful, challenging times with the pandemic, and especially with what's going on with the, I don't know the time that this will be coming out, but with the Black Lives Matter movement right now, it's important to, I guess, set boundaries. Setting boundaries is an important skill to learn in life, and knowing, I guess, your threshold for how much you can tolerate. So how much news can you tolerate? How many hours do I have to allow being away from anything digital like TV or my phone or anything to ensure that I get a good night's rest? So I want people to try and be more aware and insightful of how certain factors can impact their mental health in a good and a positive way. And that is a skill to be learned. So yeah, setting boundaries and knowing. And then number 3, I would say, well, when you think about it, and it's something that we emphasize as medical professionals, but it's so true how important sleep is, how important exercise is, and how important our nutrition is. So I think if we can kind of even make a simple change, like no soda or something, like give up soda, just something like that can really make a difference and I guess get the momentum going to focus on other aspects of our mental health.
Awesome. I thank you for sharing that. So for those in the audience that are looking to reach out to you or to learn about you and to find out more of what you do, where can they go?
So you could go on my Instagram. It's Freud and Fashion. That's FREUDAND Fashion. So Freud and Fashion. And also my blog is freudandfashion.com.
And again, thank you so much for jumping on. I think our audience members will greatly benefit from. I think we had a very comprehensive viewpoint of everything you're doing, and just giving a little bit of insight of what psychiatry is, and and that there's someone out there that's doing something different. So thank you so much for sharing your viewpoints.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Really hope your audience benefits from it.
Thank you very much. Guys, this has been another episode of Thrive Bites. If you enjoyed this, please like, share, and follow. And if you feel that someone else might benefit from this, please share it with your fellow human beings and friends and family and, your good fellow man. And we really appreciate it. And we will see you on the next one. Hey guys, that was another episode of Thrive Bites. If you like that episode, please subscribe and follow for new episodes. And don't forget to rate us on Apple Podcasts.